perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we'll not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community, thought that get results. Also, you can follow this program on a live video stream, our Facebook channel at Vaughan Radio, and our Facebook page at, or rather our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Click subscribe. Thank you all again. Your voice in the community, thought that get results. Tonight, officers from the Nevis Water Department, they'll be here talking about what they're doing and, most importantly, the water situation on Nevis. Floyd Robinson is a water resource engineer. Floyd, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and to the listeners.
Santonia Mills is the manager at the department. Santonia, good evening. Thanks for having. Thanks for coming.
Hi, good evening, Webbo. Thank you.
Clyjon Wilson, technician, production technician. Clyjon Wilson. Clyjon, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to the general public who are listening.
Roger Hanley is the operations manager. Roger, it's good to have you.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Herbert. I'd like to say pleasant good evening to the general public as well.
And Clyde Maynard is the distribution manager. Clyde, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Okay, we apologize for that break. We were trying to get some technical stuff organized. Let's hope that we have that. So again, we apologize for that. So we have Floyd Robinson, who is the water resource engineer. Santonio Mills is the manager at the water department. Roger Hanley is the operations manager. Clyde Maynard is the distribution is it the distribution manager? Supervisor. And Clyde Sean Wilson is a technician. We are going to hear from each person, so let's do that first.
Okay.
Right? And then we get into the full discussion. So in any order you choose, Mr. Robinson, you seem as if you're ready to begin, and then who's next, we just do that. Robinson.
Yes, sir. So thank you, Webbo, and good evening to our listeners again tonight. We're here in honor of World Water Week, which was actually last week. The program was scheduled but had to be postponed to this week. And so we're here to discuss water department and water issues in this changing climate environment that we're in. The theme for World Water Week this year was glacier preservation, and when you look at that in the tropics, it's like what that has to do with us. But it actually it's related in a distant way, but related nonetheless. Most of us will know that climate change has caused a number of different issues, and one of it has to do with extreme climate. We have situations where people are experiencing droughts, and in some cases we have too much water, they're experiencing floods. The thing about the glaciers for us here in the Caribbean is that these glaciers, when they do melt, the runoff tends to go in the ocean, and so we hear about sea level rise, and that's the biggest threat to these small island states, even the Atlantic and the Pacific states. And so when it comes to glaciers, that's the issues that we're faced with, where sea level rise would have some serious impact on our wells. As a matter of fact, in the 80s was when we had most of our exploration done, and the wells tend to be coastal. Number of our wells are pretty close, within a mile in some cases to the ocean. And so with sea level rise, you could understand the impact that would have. As a matter of fact, in some cases, Mr. Wilson, who is our production technician, has always been passionate. We are seeing where we're having salt intrusion. The salinity of the water of those older wells are now increasing. We did our best to manage them under the condition where people are using more water, but that is just a fact of life, where with sea level rise, you're going to have more of that happening. I just quickly wanted to just go through a quick timeline in terms of where the department has come from. I mean, back in the days, most people who are listening remember carrying water for miles. And when you get to the water station and stuff, fights could break up because serious business. You fill your bucket and somebody tips it over, you're asking for trouble. And so we have moved on quite a ways. As a matter of fact, Mr. Herbert, I was at a seniors session last week, Wednesday, and a young lady at the age of 90, she reminded us about how far we have come. Some people were discussing some of the issues we are having, and she talked about having to travel miles, and we were discussing water quality, and she said, not all water is not perfect. No water is perfectly clean, but we do our best here to make sure that we keep up the standard. And so from those wells, from those days of carrying water for miles onto wells being dug on the coastal, we have about 4 wells in Charlestown. There are a few of them over in the Maddens area, and there's some down in Zion, what we call Padlock. And those wells have done a great job. Some of them are not no longer in commission, because over the years, the wells have what we call something, the alignment changes, so we can't install pumps in them anymore. You move forward to about 2008 or so, when we had some other wells dug at high elevation, and those ones that are at high elevation are a little bit more protected from saltwater intrusion, but it just means that they're deeper, and so they're more expensive to maintain. The water has to come from deeper, and so the amount of electricity necessary to bring that water up. But there's a trade-off. So we have wells now that are producing much more than we have had in the past. in those wells from the 80s used to do about 100 maximum. The biggest ones 100 gallons per minute. In some cases now we're doing 300 gallons per minute on some of the new wells that we have. And so we had that progression from the coastal wells to the wells in higher elevation, and from there we also got there was a project what we call the water enhancement project that saw the replacement of some of the reservoirs and tanks that we have, and that was about 2014 2016. We had a number of tanks that were leaking over the years. We were able to replace them. Of all the tanks, I think only one we have that needs replacing. That's in bad condition. And most recently, most people would know, just last year we started another drilling expedition. So from 2008, we hadn't done any drilling. One of the wells that were dug in 2008 is just around 2000, maybe 18. The well in Hamilton that we spent some money and got a filtration system to bring that one online. And now we're exploring some new wells. We have dug 2 so far in the Maddens area, a total of over 500,000 gallons a day for both wells. So that's a good sign. And so we have done some stuff over the years. And the challenge, again, as we're talking about the changing climate, is managing this water. And so what I do, and Mr. Donald Sargent and Ms. Inga Lawrence, who are in the Water Resource Management Unit, what we're trying to do is to keep a tab on the groundwater, which 98% of our water comes from groundwater, and the other 2% comes from surface water. We're tasked with managing that resource that's beneath the ground. Some years ago, for World Water Week, the theme was making the invisible visible. And when we talk about the invisible, we're talking about the water that we just can't see. We know it's there, or after years of studies and mapping, we know it's there. So the job at Water Resources Management is to really keep a tab on what's going on, because we can't extract water at any old rate and anyhow we feel. There's a whole set of science that goes with it, so we have to make sure that we are doing it in a sustainable manner. And so basically, Webbo, that is what Water Resources is responsible for. Along with disaster, we keep track of the rainfall, because every source of water in this world is actually from rainfall. Some of it is groundwater, some of it is surface water, rivers, some of it, as we talk about the glaciers in the cold countries, is captured through glaciers, and during summertime, the melting provides water for folks in those areas. So basically, for Water Resources, that is what we do. And there's a full mouthful there, but
Yes, who's next?
so Mr. Hanley, what would we pick up from there?
Okay, good evening again to the general public, and I'm Roger Hanley. I'm the operational manager at the Water Department. My role is basically to coordinate the various divisions within the department in terms of the production division, the distribution, maintenance, more or less the technical side. And we also have a project department, and so it's basically to coordinate all of these departments and to sort of plan the daily activities.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Antonia Mills, the manager at the Nevis Water Department. My role basically just to oversee both the field and also the admin and billing division. We basically have 4 major divisions. We have admin and billing, production, we also have distribution and quality control. So basically I just oversee all divisions within the water department.
Okay, Christian Wilson again. I'm the production supervisor at the Nevis Water Department. My role is basically to oversee all production wells, electrical machinery, everything to do with water production that goes into the tanks, tank management, SCADA systems, basically whole works that you get from your tanks going forward. So I just keep your water on. That's basically my job in a nutshell. Thank you.
I am Clyde Maynard, the distribution supervisor. I work directly under Mr. Hanley, and my responsibility is the maintenance teams and new connections.
So that's what we have. That's everyone with their responsibility.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me just ask you, Robinson, because we had a previous discussion maybe a couple of years ago, a couple of months ago, and one of the things that not just with Nevis but with the other islands, there's strain and stress as far as water is concerned, and doing a lot of searches. You just mentioned the managing the water that we have, the resource. Now, how many aquifers do we have? Do we know?
We have about 6 different aquifers. In some cases, they're actually interconnected. So there's no, in some cases, there's no proper delineation. You know, water can seep from one aquifer to the next. So based on what we discovered in 2008, we have about 6 aquifers around the island.
Okay. And some of them are, as you said, interconnected.
Yes.
Okay, so we may not really have 6. The reason why I'm going there is because we learned recently that we had discovered new water in the Madness area.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that one that was interconnected, or that's a separate aquifer?
Well, I think as we say new, then, you know, technically there is nothing new under there in terms of any undiscovered aquifer. We are actually drilling into, so some aquifer actually produce a lot of water. And so what's going on with us right now in that area, we have about 8 wells in that aquifer, but we are not by any means taking out all the water that's available. And also depends on the location of these wells. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of coastal wells. And real quickly, what you have happening, what you see on land in terms of water running from high areas to low areas, we have the same thing happening on the ground. But it's at a much slower rate, and some cases we obviously can't see where it is. So some of these studies that we do is trying to identify that. So basically, there are flows sometimes in higher flows in some areas, and what we have discovered for that particular area of Maddens, there's a fair amount of water that's high up. But like I'm saying, comparing to the previous wells from the 90s and the 80s, for example, which are only about 250 feet deep, we are talking about 6 up to 8, even 1,000 feet deep now when we go up higher. So it's actually the same water flowing from the mountain to the ocean, and what we try to do is to stick a well and try to capture the water as it flows by. So honestly, there is no new, at least we haven't discovered any new aquifers as yet in terms of delineation. The ones we're drilling in is ones that we knew that existed.
Okay, so because I from a layman standpoint, I kept asking the question, if we have, let's say, a cistern, right? And we have a certain amount of water in it, and one well, you know, have one pipe bringing it up,
Yeah.
and it's not bringing it up fast enough and supplying enough acreage
Yeah.
areas. And I asked, why can't we build 2 wells in the same area?
Yeah. And in the case that we are doing, that's what we technically have done. The challenge to Webbo is that the amount of water that we are taking, I think the next closest well is doing about 300 gallons per minute, and here's a new one doing about the same amount. There is interference underground when you have wells of that capacity, so we have to make sure that they're drilled far apart enough that one is not taken away from the other. Because you would imagine, as the well is so if they have a water table that has a certain level and you put a well there, the water level is going to drop in that area of the well, and you can't put a second well close enough, because then that would have a second interference and the level might drop too much for that first well. So the first well we end up pumping nothing. So we have to manage the distance between those wells to limit the interference and what we call the drawdown, because so we really can't put wells together. The aquifer doesn't support that. There's some aquifers that could do that. There's so much water that you stick two wells next to each other and you don't see the difference. But that's not the situation in our case. So yes, we have multiple wells in that aquifer, to answer your question. Yes.
When I said next to each other, I wasn't really speaking in terms of mathematical distance.
Well,
I was talking about getting from the same area.
I just
as you have probably indicated with Maddens.
Yeah.
Right? Probably the same aquifer, different locations.
I just want to make the distinction because sometimes the listeners would sometimes misinterpret. But yes, it's not right on top of each other. But I think in this case we're about a mile, 3/4 of a mile from the other well.
Based on your experience, is it fair to conclude we probably have enough water supply in the aquifers, but it's the challenge to get the wells in certain locations and to get the water?
I try to stay away from saying that we have enough water, because the biggest enemy, if I must say that way, of groundwater, and we are in an earthquake zone. I mean, it doesn't take much for for any shifting that would misalign, would change the flow of an aquifer for one, could destroy the wells that we have there. The rainfall, as I indicated earlier, is what replenishes these wells, these aquifers. So there are a couple of variables that kind of prevent me from making a firm statement saying that we have enough. The truth of the matter is, depends on the development and what's going on and stuff. There is not enough there without conservation, without some kind of reuse, without especially for sustainability. We probably could be surviving based on the wells we have now, 10-15 years, which comes very quickly. There may not be enough. So it all depends on our activities above ground that could severely impact what's going on below there. And so when we are talking groundwater and water supply, we love the word sustainability, because we got to be able to maintain this for years to come, way beyond my time. So I cautiously talk about having enough water. Right now we're pretty good, but then again, of course, the demand could increase in a way that, or in a drought, because again, rainfall is what supplies the aquifers, and if there's no rain and we are still using the water, then you can see that water becoming a problem.
But it can also be we're not keeping pace in terms of getting enough wells into the aquifers, because a few short years ago it almost seemed as if we were in a crisis where the aquifers were concerned, and we were all around looking for alternate. Correct? Because I think I heard in the news recently we have some other method of getting water shortly other than the groundwater.
Well, I in terms of the crisis, I am not. Okay, let me back up a bit, Webbo. Again, using the term, you go back to the term making the invisible visible. We have to do a lot of survey above ground to indicate what's happening below. We obviously can't see what's going on down there, and so that's cost is an issue. It's not cheap to do that, especially to do it effectively. I would admit to you that the surveys we are doing for this current drilling was surveys that were done some years ago. So because of cost limitation, and we had some success with using the old data, but there is also a cost factor. I give you a quote that Nebula gave us, for example, just for one well, was near $100,000, $98,000 just to get electricity to a particular site. So what I'm getting at is that to get to the aquifers, to get to the water, there's a cost issue that sometimes we just can't get to it in time. The aquifers, what we are doing with water resources is now trying to establish what these aquifers could maintain. What's the capacity of these aquifers? That is not a straightforward thing. So going back to the Madden's aquifer, for example, we have 8 wells there already. What we have shown by punching a couple more, that we have some more water that we can sustain, because we continuously have to monitor the level of the aquifers. Matter of fact, we are just now installing some water loggers that automatic, that could keep, you know, more better records than us having to go there once a month and try to establish what that level is. So we are a good ways still away from really fully managing our aquifers, understanding exactly what's going on with them. Not because we're able to punch and get some water means that there's a whole lot more left, you know. So there's a whole approach that we have to, and with the installation of the water resource management unit, that's part of what we are tasked with. We're getting instrumentation down there to really see what's going on with the aquifers.
But you just made a statement that for now we're good with water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
Right. A few years ago, where we were depending and we were saying we have drought and so it's difficult, and so we can get a well in Hamilton. Remember that?
Yes.
We got the water treated and all that, and we put it online. Okay. Now, the evidence to show that we were in a crisis situation, going from the statement I made, somewhere I heard about a desalination plant. Ever heard about that?
I actually forgot to mention that in the sequence of events. Yes, sir. So
Okay.
there's yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden, we were trying to get this desalination plant. My information is, you just mentioned cost, and you were talking about the traditional groundwater, correct? Okay. But the desalination costs even more, correct?
Traditionally, yes.
Okay. So if we were able to get more of the groundwater, notwithstanding it's costly, it is still less costly than the desalination.
The good thing about the desal plant that we got, Webbo, it is solar powered, and that is way cheaper than the usual fossil fuel supply for energy.
And reliable?
And reliable. Should be running beautifully. Actually, I mean, I think I stand with you, because I've always not been very excited about desal plants because of the cost. But this one we got, and I must mention too, it was a grant, so we didn't have to do any capital costs. I mean, right now we just be challenged with maintenance costs, operational costs. But it's desal powered. It's solar powered. It's solar powered, and it's automatic. It sits there just waiting for the demand, and it just runs on its own. What we do now, the only challenge when it comes to that plant is that we do not have any backup batteries for night operation, so we do rely on NEVLEC for nighttime. But that is something that with a battery backup, then we could reduce the reliance. But even with that combination of electricity and solar power, it's just considerably cheaper.
And where is that desal plant located on Evans?
That is in the Butlers area, coast side from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in that area. It's down that side.
Right. Is there's a well, or is it directly in the sea?
There's a well. There's a couple of coastal wells that we extract the water from, and as a matter of fact, when we did that, the quality of the water was much better than we anticipated, so the operation cost goes down. The filtering process is easier, but there are wells there, and then the brine is pumped back out to the sea. And
that is in terms of work in progress to come on stream shortly?
Oh, it's been on stream, Mr.
Oh, it's on stream? And what are we getting from it?
50 gallons a minute, yeah.
And that's in the general supply?
Yes, it's pumped directly into distribution, and it's been going on for at least 2 months now.
And so one would not be able to discern or detect which is which?
No, sir.
But that's interesting. So if that is working out fine, are we doing more of those?
Well, again, the capital cost is not cheap. Now that we have that the plant is expandable, so that's something that we haven't really looked at yet. I mean, that came on stream in the middle of the drilling project, which is still ongoing. And like I said, because, the monies are limited, that's probably something that will be looked at later. The way I look at it, we want to complete the drilling first, but this whole plant's expandable. It doesn't take much to add a couple more filters and, increase the power. Maybe the solar powered one just needs a couple more panels. But that's one of the beauty actually about desal plants. It doesn't take much to really double, triple their sizes.
And that's in the Butler's area, you said?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any other areas, if you know, that you have tested that the water is pretty okay for desalination?
Well, desalination doesn't. The process is not really in, if I would say it this way, doesn't really care about the location. I mean, you take salt water and you
except that you mentioned that the quality was much better.
Well, the quality, I mean, yeah, there's in terms of its saltiness. So that's the quality I was talking about, the concentration of salt. So if you take it directly from the ocean, of course, that is, salinity is more from the ocean than if you're doing a well. Yeah. If you taste it, you may not taste the difference, but actually the numbers are showing that there's a difference. So in that case, and it's always cheaper to do wells, to do brackish water, rather what we call brackish. It is just salty enough, do brackish wells than to do ocean intakes.
So we are much better off with our water supply than we were a year ago?
Again, Mr. Herbert, I tried to stay away from that. Maybe a year.
The reason why I asked that question, with Culturama 50 and the expected influx of persons and stuff like that, there was a lot of talk as to whether we will have enough water. Not correct?
That was correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since that, or around that time, before that, until now, we added.
Yes.
Okay. How did we do for that period of time with the water?
We did well, I don't think at any time. I think just prior to that, we were rationing water. But during Culturama, I think things went pretty well based on the fact, the kind of numbers we had here, the number of visitors we had, and all the activities. I must say though that as we're talking about, and not to get off this topic, the Webbo, as we're talking about enough water, one of the things we have to be careful with, again, and I want us to enter conservation, I want to enter management into it, because there is no enough water anywhere in the world. There really isn't. And I think with the climate patterns, we're really seeing that. There's some rivers that have dropped tremendous levels, those who use surface water, and so folks are now using their wastewater for reuse and recycling, even in the big countries, with the sewage. And so that is why you see me try to stay away from enough water, because that is also dependent on demand. We could have, as we're talking about industries and commercialization, there's some industry that use a lot of water. And when a man is trying to make a money making venture, I mean, for example, car washes, those are recent things around here, water intensive. How do you tell a person that you can't have that business? So we try to, of course, supply the water, but somewhere along the line, that entrepreneur has to now find a way to recycle some of that water, to make sure that we have sustainability, that we have longevity in terms of the use. So there's a whole process that goes along with that. There's not a whole bunch of water just sitting there, and if the rainfall patterns change, that water of course diminishes. So I just wanted to just add that in, and that's why you see me reluctant to talk about enough water.
You just mentioned that prior to the same Culturama 50, you were rationing water.
Yeah.
Why?
Because of the demand. I mean, we didn't have enough. The sources, we won't be able to produce as much water as been used, one. And when we look back at the numbers too, there's a fair amount of waste to Webbo on the island, where people are just not respecting the fact. As a matter of fact, the last time we were here, I think we had a discussion about tariffs, where that is being used as a conservation method. our water up until recently was maybe just above Sinkis's in terms of cheapest. The NIA did move the price a little bit based on some numbers, and I'm pretty sure I don't have the numbers to say, well, okay, what the reduction has been, but I'm almost certain that people are using less water. But at the same time, there's still a growing rate in terms of the need for water. So one of the issues when it comes to water, when we say we were struggling, is that I see people washing down their walkways, some of the folks even on the road, and that is not the intended use of water. So sometimes you have the abuse that adds to the demand, and of course the country is growing in terms of different water using endeavors and people using water and stuff and so on. But we have realized a big part of it is waste too.
Okay, we have the whole team here. Is there anyone who would like to mention any challenges that you have at the water department and you want to make an appeal to the general public?
Well, of course, Roger Hanley speaking, of course, this may not be applicable at this time, but if we were to look back at post the COVID era, I actually noticed the extent to which the water consumption rose dramatically. I suppose persons within Nevis thought that food would have been running out of food, so they figured that they would do more agriculture, and of course within the domestic sector more persons started to wash their hands, and the health aspect would promote washing of hands and that sort of thing. So it actually put a strain at that time. It put a strain on the demand, and as was mentioned by Mr. Robinson, I don't think there's much attention given to the monitoring of the water use. From my study of the water use sector, the domestic sector uses approximately between 60 and 70% of the total consumption, and it really is a need for the general public to look at their consumption as we look at not only improving and to add to the supply that we intend to, but it's a way to curb the growing demand for water, and so that for the general public and who are or is coming after would have a sufficient water supply.
Trishan Wilson here, production supervisor. I would just like to jump on Mr. Floyd Robinson's discussion earlier, just to answer the question, Webbo, on the rationing. I know sometimes we don't want to talk about it, but just for the sake of the public to know why we ration. There are times when our production is very challenged by the demand, and usually we have a trend over the last number of years. We have a trend whereas from March to September we have very high production each month. So whenever the demand gets so close to production, like say in between the 80s and 90%, we begin to see declines. So then we have to put in our operation to manage better, and then we will make the call to ration just to keep our tanks from being depleted. So with the drilling program, it helps us to add more to the supply, so we can better combat the rise demand during the real hot times, as what Culturama basically is. One of the hot times of the year when we have to really ramp up and manage production better, because demand goes up and basically equals it. So that's why we have to ration. That's why we would have to ration if demand goes up to meet production. And when that happens, there's a very large strain, on the workforce for the water department. We have to go into a serious planning mode, whereas our workers work around the clock, even more around the clock. So when we have a lot of demand, and most demands are not all like usefully consumed, some are wasted. So we're trying not to have pleading with the public to try not to waste the water, especially during the times of March and September, when the place is extremely hot. Let's try to conserve as much as we can, use water wisely, so it can help us at the water department manage better in critical times.
There were times when you had to ration, as you just said, right? Manage. And you would hear responses from the general public. Have they all been fair?
I won't say all have been fair. I'm going to be honest. I won't say all have been fair.
Okay, so you have an opportunity to give an explanation, because sometimes, for instance, let's use public works, and you have public works may do a road, and for whatever reason someone may criticize it, when the workers of public works under the circumstances may think that they well have done their best, but sometimes they're not in a position to answer or to explain, right? Sometimes I wonder, and if it is in your situation as well, that people get panic and scared, because I use this example frequently. A fellow called in here one time and criticize or accuse my staff of doing something untoward. But I was right here to defend and told him that he knew he made it up. He knew it was not true. Right? And he never called back again. But I was there at the time. And so that's what I'm saying, that over the past year or few years, sometimes maybe, as you said, it is the usage, but a lot of harsh comments are made, and it sometimes is not targeted at the workers, but you may feel that your team is doing the best that it could under the circumstances. So that's what I'm saying. You have an opportunity now to maybe say, sometimes A, B, or C, but this is what it is. No?
Okay, let me just make it short. One of the most the most complaints I've heard is the matter of when rain falls. So much rain falling, why is it that we have to ration and stuff like that? Now, for the sake of knowledge, rainfall doesn't impact the aquifers in 2 hours or in 10 hours. Water underground takes millions of years to settle there and grow. So it's a very slow process. What rain does is it reduces the consumption for a particular time. For instance, agriculture, people washing the cars, the place is very cold. People don't do a lot of water. They'll use a lot of water when the place is cold. So whenever rain falls, it changes the atmospheric temperature, and we get a little break. But when the sun comes back out, it's back into pressure again. So the issue of rain is not the concern directly for water department. It helps, but very short. So just want to share that to the general public, just so you don't stress the workers when you see them.
So you think, maybe not always, but sometimes the criticism is unfair?
It's unfair sometimes. Some people could be on point, but majority of the time it is unfair because they just may not know what goes on in regards to our water resource.
Yes. Maynard, you wanted to add something?
Yes, well, as maintenance supervisor, I deal with mostly leaks and repairs, and one of the things that we rely on is the customer's feedback on when pipes are broken. And one of the things that we get complaints about is that we take too long to respond to leaks. one of the issues I find in Nevis is that we don't give directions very well. So in responding to the leak, sometimes we take long or we are unable to find that leak, and so the water wastage might be a little more than it could have been. So I'm just admonishing the general public, sometimes when you give directions, it could be more specific on the location of the leak. We have technology where a picture can be sent or video, and to give better direction towards this leak so that we can repair them in faster time to reduce the wastage of the water.
Well, this might be a light moment, but when someone calls to say a leak is someplace, they talk to someone?
Yes, most times I get feedback where you might hear a leak is in Brownhill, and I would not get exactly where in Brownhill that leak is.
Okay, so if I call you and I were to say they have a leak over bad, and you don't know exactly where over bad, what would you likely do?
I would ask you exactly where that is.
Okay. And then you will work with me until when you get the exact location, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But a lot of times the communication is passed down.
Or it's passed down?
Yes.
So that the person you have there should do a better job, right?
Yes. So when I ask a question, where in Brownhill or where in Bath Village, that person wouldn't be able to tell me where because the information was passed from someone else. So if they could be more specific, then
you mean the person in the village who see the leak? If they could be more specific?
yes.
And not the person who you have there getting the information to. I said this might be the light moment. Ms. Mills, you're the manager of the department. Do you have anything you would like to encourage the public to do? As far as I know, all utilities face a lot of issues and complaints from the general public, be it telephone, electricity, water. So do you have any of those concerns you would like to mention and encourage the public to?
Yes, Webbo. I would just also want to add to what Mr. Maynard said. Sometimes when customers call, we would ask them if we can take their numbers, and if we cannot find the leak, if we can pretty much call them. When the team get there, they can call them. So we're also trying to encourage customers to leave their numbers, even their name, their name. So we can just return that call to let them know, find out where the leak is, and also let them know that the leak has been completed. What I would also like to encourage the general public is to pay their bills on time. We are now starting to do disconnection. Well, we started to do disconnection in 2022. So around this time, we are doing disconnection. So I'm just trying to encourage the general public to pay their bills on time, whether online or come inside and pay. We are now issuing our bills, the post office. If you are not receiving your bills, you can speak to the post office, but we are also sending out our bills both online and also through the post office.
I want to go back to this reporting of leaks and stuff like that, because I find it's important, and I find it's a philosophy, right? Even with electricity, and let me use us as an example so that a person may not feel that I'm trying to, highlight them or something. I think it was last week when we were live on air, someone called and said to fix the tower lights. Now we're very grateful for that, because people don't have to do that. That's our responsibility. And if we didn't realize it was out, and someone pointed out to us, we're very grateful for that. So I thought that it would be the same thing with other entities. So if you have the water department and there's a leak someplace, and a customer or someone in the general public, a good citizen, calls you and says, hi, there's a leak in Bath Village, Now, that's a help for you. That's your responsibility, not correct? No?
That's correct, Webbo.
Right. So, if they're not very good at communicating and giving directions, don't it make sense for you to have somebody who is articulate and very good at getting that information rather than maybe saying the people are not giving good directions? No?
I think that's well accepted, yes. Because unfortunately in Nevis, I mean, and talking about the light moment, I had a friend call me one time telling me there was a leak, and I said, where? Up the road there or so. And they started going on with a whole bunch of stuff crossed by the big tree, by the tamarind tree and stuff. Unfortunately, you know, it was a friend of mine and they were having a light moment themselves. But usually that is typically what we have to deal with. There's certain, what do you call it? There are certain areas that are popular that people try to use as a reference. The challenge is that our makeup of our population has changed. You know, there are lots of non-divisions who doesn't know where some of those landmarks are, and they may have changed the name of the landmarks, and so unfortunately that is something. If I'm to put a plug here for physical planning, I know they're currently working on getting the GIS system up with road namings, and we're trying to work our way towards, hopefully soon, towards addresses. But it's something that's a challenge, and I accept your comment, Webbo, where you have to have somebody who is willing to dig deeper. You know, ask you a couple more questions, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that will be saving the water. It's a favor to us, like you mentioned. But I just said that it's also still a challenge, and that's something I think that obviously could be worked on in going forward. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else in any area who in operating would like to point out certain challenges they meet and would like, you know, to explain what it is and stuff? Because sometimes you find that the public can be very harsh, and sometimes people in the offices or, you know, supplying the service do try, and some of the times is a misunderstanding.
I think I'll at least introduce something. One challenge I know, and as a former manager, one challenge we have is that when folks get a high bill and they may have a leak, they don't want to accept the explanation, and so it's really up to the consumer, and they have to have some skin in the game. You know, we know that toilets are notorious for running sometime after you flush them. Sometimes they run so quietly you don't even know they're running. But obviously, so our consumers gotta check their meters frequently. Do a couple tests. Turn off all the pipes in their houses, for example. Go look at the meter. The meter has, I think, about 7 dials, and the one to the far right has a couple of white notches on it. So that's the one that works like a leak indicator. So if you have a leak, that one should be turning very slowly. So if all your pipes are off and that one is moving, you obviously have a problem. You could even, usually on the installation, there's a stopcock before the meter that the department would use if they have any maintenance issues, and there's one on the inside that you use if you want. So that one, for example, could be turned off. And if you turn that one off and it was running previously, the water should stop, because the stopcock is just a foot away, if that far, from the meter. So those are some indicators that the public has to use, because those are the tests that we run when we get out there, and we, you know, to say that, hey, you have a leak. I think a lot of people think the department just say that to pass the onus back onto the consumer, but that's not true. That's not true. The information you have in the billing system that shows you your average read, if your customer using 8,000 gallons, and that's high, depends on where you are, and you jump up to 12, something isn't right. You know, and usually it's only upon getting the bill that you see that there was an issue, and so the investigation will start, you know, on the next bill.
Okay, so you just gave one hint or one guideline to keep your water bills in check? What are some of the other things you can do to, ensure that the bill that you get is legit in reference to your usage? Leaks are one thing.
They can also just monitor their reading. The meter readers, they go out from basically the 1st of each month, from the 1st to the 15th. So a lot of people know when the meter reader is coming around. They can pretty much monitor their readings, and when they receive their bills, they would pretty much look at their bills and see if it corresponds with what they monitored during that month.
I think if I add, I guess by monitoring, I mean, if the meter reader is coming every 30 days, then you could read it 15, 10 days, just pass and make a check. It could be a quick picture. You don't have to write anything down now these days. Take your phone, do a quick snap. It will be time stamped, and you would now see, because we are responsible for the usage in our property. I think culturally over the years, the department has been lenient that if you have a massive leak, they'll try to work with you and stuff. But the bottom line is that meter is really the one that indicates what your consumption is, and that's what the department goes by to make sure that you're being charged for the consumption that you use. And I want to add quickly that leaks and stuff is a consumption. It's your responsibility to jump on it as quickly as possible. So like Miss Mills was just saying, that the meter reader comes around on the 1st, around the 10th or the 11th, take a look again and see if it makes sense to you. Have I used that much water in 10 days? And as you get your bill towards the end of the month, when you realize that maybe between the last read you took and when the bill comes, that could have been when something happens. But you have to be part of the game.
Okay, any?
Just to share some advice as a water operator, it's just advice to the general public. In regards to managing your water use, you could usually rely on the government infrastructure to help you track your water, but just to share, there are different technologies you could apply in your household to help you manage your water use. We're in a modern world now. You could buy electronic meters that could help to tell you if you're losing water anywhere, if you don't have the patience or don't understand how to read the government's meter, which I do think the general public should come in and let the meter readers or the cashier explain how the meters are read. Alright, so it's best for the general public to try and come in and learn that particular information.
Because do you have a lot of issues with that person who's getting a bill and figuring I did not use all that water?
Yes.
And
Every day, yes.
go ahead and
No, I said every day.
Here's what I would like you to do, right? You work at the department. We have a lot of issues. We hear people complain a lot about water, not correct?
Yes.
Right. So you're there and you would hear what people complain about. So this is an opportunity to say, well, these are some of the things that people complain about, but this is what it really is. Okay, so let's do that.
Okay, so I'm just basically saying that when customers come and complain about their leaks, as Mr. Robinson said, we are not really responsible for their leaks. But if we realize that maybe if you normally use maybe 1,000 gallon, 2,000, and there's an increase maybe within 3 months, we might do a reduction on their bills. But a lot of customers, they will come and they will complain about their leaks, and basically they think that we are responsible for their leaks.
Even if you were to explain to them that the evidence shows otherwise?
Yes.
Okay. And that's one reason why sometimes there are issues. Do they have other reasons, and the evidence, for instance, shows that they did use the water? You never have those instances? Most, if not all, of the instances are instances where people, when they have very high usage or above normal usage is leaks?
Majority of the times, yes.
Okay. So how do people do use the water?
I must
Not really cognizant of it because they just use water.
I think that's part of the issue, Webbo, in terms of how much. I mean, when you run the water from the kitchen sink, there's no meter there to show how much you're running. And I think we have gone to where people, for example, we rinse our dishes on the running water.
That's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, and so you don't realize how much you're using.
Habits.
You're washing the car, and we drop the hose while we what we're doing, and we just don't know. There's just and I know for those of us in the business, we have done our little tests here and there showing over a certain time. I know I've done that personally to have these conversations that 2 minutes of just really having the pipe run consumes X amount of water. Some people, and this is something that I know the department is fighting with in terms of the pressure zones. There's some areas that the pressure is a little higher than others, and when you have higher pressure, you're moving a little bit more water than you would under a situation where the pressure is lower. So again, you're not paying attention.
So habits could be one.
Habits definitely could.
And especially if you have kids.
Well, let's not even. That's a whole different conversation in itself. Yes, sir.
But we want to have the conversation because we have time.
So
work with me.
Sure.
That is what we're trying to do to educate people concerning it, because when they are not and people get bills, then they blame you, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so go ahead.
And so you talk about having children and of how they're not, they use water as children do. Even taking a shower. Sometimes you have the shower running while you're soaping up. Those are things that people have to be cognizant of. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the biggest culprit is normally your toilet. You flush that toilet and you're gone, and it doesn't stop running. Yeah? And so that's a place that people ought to check often enough. Couple of things you could do is, if you have food coloring, put it in the tank itself, and if your toilet is leaking, you will see that end up in the bowl. There are a couple of other issues, a couple of things you could do by putting toilet paper inside the bowl itself, and if the water is running down, you see the paper gets wet. So you have, because one of the things about toilets is that they run so quietly when they're leaking. Some make noise, some don't. But so the toilet is really the big culprit. And then we talk about habits, we talk about how you wash your dishes in terms of running water, we talk about your children, even the way you take showers, washing your cars with running hoses. And
the drip can add up to gallons, right?
Sure it can. So those are things that we are asking in general, because again, the customers have to have skin in the game. This is not just this utility, government or private, with all the resources. And so we are making an appeal here tonight as we talk about, again, on this event of World Water Week, and typically this is the only time, and that's on us, that we come to the public to say, hey, and get past that notion that the water department is there to provide water for all our needs, because there's not enough money in the world for any utility to do that, and so we are now imploring that on the consumer side, that you watch what you consume. As Mr. Maynard was saying, you call about the leaks. We'll work on the fact that we have to have people who will elicit that information, from you, to know exactly where you are, reduce the amount of time that leak goes on. But so we're trying to engage the public, and I think that for those of you who have your elderly seniors who remember carrying water, we have to pay attention to what they're saying, because we came from an era of that, Webbo, to the point where if you ask a preschooler where the water comes from, they'll probably tell you out the pipe. We from generations knew that that's not where the water really comes from. And so, as we tried to explain early here tonight and stuff, it's a lot of work to get that water to the surface. And I want to add that is heavily subsidized. I mentioned about the cost of one connection to a location, which was near 100,000 EC. Then you have operation. These pumps are sucking current every day. They run 24/7. They run 24/7. And so when people complain about the cost of water, the truth of the matter is that water is still heavily subsidized on this island. And even across in Sinker's prices are even cheaper than ours. And so folks have to understand it's not just the department itself trying to do this. So whatever is produced has to be taken care of, has to be managed, has to be reduced. Because again, with changing rainfall patterns, our aquifers are not recharging as much as they used to in the past. And so we have a whole approach now with the inception of, again, water resource management, that we're checking on the aquifers to see exactly what's happening. We could put a big old pump down there, but we can't suck more than that's there. We can't pump more than what's there. And so as much as we may have the money to get to the water, only X amount is available. And with the balance of consumers and industries and everybody who is using the water, we have to now start to have the conversation about reuse.
Just let me take this, Floyd.
Sure.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. I am just trying to think of this. They come urgently to fix leak. I just want one thing. I hope they really change, because I know one time I call them and they can't see the leak. I can give them proper direction. And it took them 36 hours to come fix the leak. The water was leaking so long that they actually crack up the road. So I hope they change the policy and start come early, as they say. Because my thing was, they say water scarce, and here just water running on the road. And like I say, it took them 36 hours to come fix the pipe. I'm not trying to bash them, I'm just trying to pull up. Every time I see a leak, I call and I report it.
Normally, okay. Floyd, you heard that?
I showed it, and that by any standard is not what water services and Nevis is trying to attain. Can't begin to understand why that would take that long, but the point is well taken. And I think I just have to go back to what you said, Webbo, about having somebody on our end who could ask the right question so we could narrow down that time of getting to the leaks. For those who are pretty savvy in terms of technology, as Mr. Maynard mentioned, taking a picture, you could do a pin drop, in terms of the location. That's another way. I think most younger folks are familiar with that, where you get on your phone and you just press for a second and you get the bearings and you can set it, and then that's probably the most accurate way of first getting into the leaks.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi, Webbo. I'm listening to the program. I had an instance a few months ago. Custom to pay between $120, $130 for my water bill. But this particular month, my bill came $600+. I queried it. They said, "Oh, you have a leak." I didn't have no leak. They came to look at the meter and everything. They made me pay that money. Okay? But the next month, my bill went back to the regular thing. And unto this day, nobody refunded me anything, put anything on a bill for previous time, for time that's going to come up. Nothing. So my $800+ went down the drain. I didn't have no leak. They came to check the meter. It got to be the meter reader was drunk or something. So in instances like that, I'm just doing it up. I just don't want it to happen to anyone else because it's not fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We come back to that. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi, good evening. I was listening to the issue about leak reporting, and I had an idea/question that I wanted to run by the department. So a lot of times when I'm trying to show someone something, I would, drop a pin in WhatsApp. So you can drop a location pin. I was wondering if this is something that's possible, maybe sharing a WhatsApp number, and then customers can drop a pin, or along with that also sending pictures, or if they can have maybe a tab or a link on their website, if they have a website, that customers can go in and they can go on a map and maybe drop a pin there so that it could help the department find a location better. I was curious what they thought about that. I wanted to share the idea.
Well, what do you all think about it?
That is a good idea. We do have our Facebook page, Nevis Water Department, where a lot of persons will speak to our customer service clerk. She normally responds to all complaints, basically, but we do have an emergency number where we encourage customers to call that number. And customers do send pictures to that number as well.
You all game for another light moment, because this, is part of what Talk That Get Results is all about. Because you just mentioned something about emergency number. We ready for a light moment? No, Floyd says no. So, caller, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. So you heard the response?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Nobody wants that light moment, right?
You can bring it on later if you
later when you're gone.
I had the use of the pin drop for me. A location was given to me in Brown Hill, and they basically sent me a WhatsApp message with the pin, and I was actually able to open up my Google Maps and able to locate the leak based on where it was, because the direction based on the pin drop. So that is actually a useful tool as well.
Okay. But I wonder if anyone out there has a location or solution for the example that the gentleman gave when he gave the direction but didn't fix 36 hours after. You think
what I could say
solve that?
Well, what I could say sometimes too, I'm not blaming the customers all the time. I'm just saying that was one of the issues. We also have logistics times when we have to manage operations, which leak we're going to repair first. There's some circumstances. I remember a few weeks ago where a leak, I would have monitored it on Monday. I would have sent out the team on Wednesday to fix it, and they weren't able to fix it on Wednesday, and the leak was not repaired until Friday. So it's not always that we are able to respond immediately to a leak.
Okay, and that's fair. Why people sometimes afraid to tell the truth? When the gentleman told me on air that you need to look at your light, I said, thank you, we're aware of it, we're working on it. That's fair, right?
Fair enough.
That is fair.
So why?
I think one thing when it comes to water, Webbo, and because we're here tonight, for example, talking about how important water is and stuff, and you have a variety of volume of water that's leaking sometimes, yeah? And because we are accustomed to...
Floyd, just let me get this,
Sure.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Good evening, thank you for holding. Yes.
Yeah, the young lady need to give the number that people could contact. So like me, I report all the time, but I got to go search for handle number. I got a friend who work at water department who call he. But for the 36 hours thing, they were saying it's something to do with Baka. They couldn't get a Baka until such time, and the location of the leak is in Box Hill. So I give them proper direction, but they said the thing was something to do with Bako. They couldn't get Bako until then.
Okay.
That happens at times.
number.
The emergency numbers, they are 763 5319 763.
So we can try them now? No?
5319 and 665 9061. And then everyone has contact with someone in the water department as well. Someone may call Roger, someone may call Clyde, Mr. Robinson, Clishan, private numbers. But those are the two emergency numbers that we have.
And I just want to say that that's welcome. I mean, again, because of the nature of water, I don't think I ever receive a call about water that I'm upset about. I just quickly forward it to Mr. Hanley or one of the guys. We do appreciate the folks, some of the speedy responses. And again, I just want to say that we take the criticism, constructive criticism, that the time between calls and fixing could be improved, and that's just a work in progress.
This is Thought That Get Results. We are speaking with the water officials from the Nevis Water Department, and we'll take a quick break. When we come back, if you'd like to be part of the discussion, our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and 01700. The back half of these.
Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
You're listening to Vaughn Radio from the Federation of St. Kitts Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with officers from the Nevis Water Department. Robinson, you were saying something.
I was just, if you could help me, I can't remember the point I was making.
Okay, well, when you remember, we get to it. Yeah. But I wanted to ask, though, that some number of wells in terms of the development of water in Nevis, you were doing maybe 9, 10, whatever, and I think I heard in the news at least you had brought 1 or 2 on stream. What's the update, or what's the status with that?
So initially when the contract went out, Webbo, we were talking about 9 wells, but also part of the contract is talking about a certain quantity of water. Because I honestly, from where I stand, I don't know we'll get to 9, but we're looking for about 1.5 million gallons of water. We have completed 2 wells so far in the Manners area, and like I mentioned, total from those wells just over 600,000 gallons per day of water. We are currently in the Descent area. That's just behind Best Buy in Gingerland. We started drilling. We hit water at 800 feet, but we had some technical issues, and so we had to stop and regroup. Basically the well caved in, and we just have to now pull out the stuff, but we know there's water because we hit water just before that happened. And so that one we are regrouping to complete, and then from there we're going to move on to the Bridges area to drill that 412. From there we're looking at Jessops. We have a location in Jessops. So that's where we are with the progression of the drilling.
So 2 is on stream out of the...
One of the 2 is on stream. One of the 2. Actually, it's not fully yet, because again I mentioned about the electricity connectivity. So we have one, that's the bigger one is running on a standby generator in the meantime while we get the permanent electrical supply.
You said one caved in. Why? Just curious.
That's just the nature of when you're drilling and stuff. At that depth, the soil, it's just basically at that depth. Normally we push casing down, but at that depth it's a challenge getting the casing down that far. And we had a couple of options, and the well was holding up for a while, and so we're gonna just abandon that and move to same area, just shift over a little bit. And do it again, because again I think I want the public to understand it's called exploration for that purpose. We have no idea what we're running into. Historically we have done stuff and we have soil samples and the geology and all that, but until you start punching you have no idea what you're getting into. And honestly, this is not the first time. I mean, we have had situations like that before where you may have mini cave-ins, but so this is nothing outside the norm. You know, I don't want anybody to panic and feel like we're failing, because we're definitely far from that. This is just part of what happens when you're doing this kind of work. So we are supposed to resume next week and get things back on track.
And that was in which area?
In Dayson. That's if you head down Match,
Yes.
just Matchman Road behind the Best Buy in Gingerland.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other question that I long wanted to ask was that in the olden days, when the islands were not that developed, people used to have wells in certain areas that would, in terms of their fields, the plants and stuff like that, and maybe water the animals.
Yes, sir.
Is that an indication of that with those old wells that maybe the water table might be?
Well, I think the thing with the old wells, if you realize, most of them are coastal, because the water table is a little bit closer to the surface, closer to the coast. You're not going to find any hand-drilled drill well up in the mountain. You're not going to find that. You may have an area where there's a spring, and then you could capture that water. But in terms of wells, you're not going to find. So those wells were wells that were very shallow wells, coastal for that reason. And you're basically, the thickness of the fresh water might have been 2 feet. And again, because of the fact that the demand wasn't so heavy, the animals could get some water, you could water your field, and so on. We have gone from that to now, in terms of development and all the different usage we have of water now. When we had our outdoor toilets, there was no need for water other than for hygiene purpose. And so there's a whole different use now. And so the wells we drill obviously have to be deeper. And like I said earlier, because of the climate change effect in terms of sea level rise on our wells on the coast now, we are trying to move a little further inland. I want to just get at something real quick, Webbo, as you asked that. People talk about the runoffs from rain. When we have heavy rains, we have plenty runoffs and stuff. Why are we not capturing that water? And we haven't done any full studies, but from our experience where we stand, it is not as easy as it looks, especially for potable water. It could be water that probably could be captured for irrigation. But also, too, the challenge you have now is that the fields and the farms that you want to irrigate may be away from some of those major water courses.
But they used to do that some years ago. In the Cades Bay area, I know that. And those are largely abandoned, and as a consequence, you have to use the other water, and that puts more strain on the system, correct?
So in some cases, like you just indicated with the Cades Bay, the water was close to the fields, the farms. In some cases, it's not. Yes, Cades Bay has about 6 ponds that agriculture would have dug some years ago. I think probably 90s. And yes, with the improvement in the water system, you find that farmers and everybody is just relying on the potable water. That has been one of the biggest mandates, mandates for water resources to reverse that. Go back to these surface water supply, that the quality doesn't have to be potable for us to farmers to use. Honestly, it's going slower than I expected, because infrastructure, as much as we are saying that, those ponds are there, because those ponds are high up in the Westbury area. I think if you drive up just before you get to that egg farm area, to turn left to go into Fountain, they're on the right hand side, a few of them, and they probably need dredging. They haven't been dredged for a while. The pipes that interconnected them were surface pipes, and they've been broken up and stolen. So we have some infrastructural work to do to get those online. And I want to emphasize the whole cost again of those things. So we've been trying to reach out to some of the regional organizations like IECA and the other agricultural agencies to see what can be done to assist with that. But over in your river, for example, there's a spring that brings water down, and so we try to rely on that. The spring is up in the mountain just below the quarry, but that too is a challenge in terms of maintenance. So we are trying to get back to some of those surface supplies, but unfortunately, again, the rate is not falling like it used to.
So in other words, we have the idea, and the theory, But the problem we have is the work.
The tire hit the road. Yes, sir.
The tire hit the road. Nobody wants to work, right?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Roro, and Minister Brian here. I just wanted to call in and give my support to my hard-working water department team. I believe, Webbo, that they have been charged with the management of our precious and scarce water resource, and I believe that with all that we keep throwing at them, I believe that they continue to do the very best that they can. With all of the challenge that they are facing, I just wanted to put on the record my sincere thanks and gratitude for the work that they continue to do. A lot of the work that they do are not really seen by the public. A lot of it is on the ground, a lot of it is behind bushes and so on. So I just wanted to say thanks to them, and we do appreciate the kind of work that they are doing. We have, as they have indicated, celebrated World Water Week last week, and one of my initiatives that I thought and got the approval of Cabinet is to we intend to, in very short order, begin the process of naming some of our water infrastructure of some of the pioneers. I know that we have had some very hard-working individuals in what I would call in some of the dark days who have done some yeoman service and yeoman work to build our water infrastructure to the level where it is now. And it is my intention to name some of these facilities after some of these individuals. I believe that for generations to come, that I would hope that our people would know what the name of some of those individuals were. But I want to join with the team as well and to encourage the general public to conserve as much water as possible. I'm hearing some of the suggestions and recommendations, and I know that we would definitely take those recommendations and expand and dive into them a bit more. But I just wanted to call Webbo, like I said, and say thanks to the team. I know that they do what they do under some very difficult circumstances at times. So I just wanted to say thanks to them.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, we just want to thank the Minister for that recognition. I think I've always said that to work in water, you have to want to be in water. It's sometimes a thankless job, but because we say water is life and it's one of the most, if not the most precious resource, then we kind of just keep at it. I also want to join the Minister in terms of the recognition of folks whose shoulders we stand on. One such person I want to call out, and I get myself in trouble for doing that and leaving out others, but it's Floyd Gabby Harris. I think I sat with him a couple of days ago, and I think he was probably officially the first water manager when we were trying to organize the department. And we sat and he spoke about a whole bunch of people. Folks, if you're in Gingerland, you know Willie Natter. Down in Camps, there was Christian Atherton, and I'm getting more and more in trouble because I'm going to leave people out. But he mentioned the names, and I have it documented. And we just wanted to also just add our thanks and recognition, because the foundation of anything is not easy to build. I think we are living pretty, those of us who are in the business right now, in terms of all the technology and all the different fancy stuff, quote unquote, that we have, compared to when these guys had to use pickaxe to trench. We have backhoes, we have lots of equipment now. Granted that the system is a lot more complicated than it was before, so there is that too. But I just wanted to just also mention the folks the forerunners, those who went before us and who have built the foundation on which we stand.
Okay. Anyone else with any? Yeah, go ahead, Floyd.
I think one thing I wanted to add to Webbo, and this is a number, as we're talking about sustainability and so on, we have a number of citizens that have cisterns that they're not using. That's another part of the equation I wanted to try and reestablish. And so I'm putting it out here tonight that if you call the government number 469-5521 and ask for water resources management, and you start telling us a couple of things. We want to know if you have a cistern, if it's functional, because what I want to propose to my peers / and then to the minister is that let's get back to that.
Sure. Because I have something I'd like to add to.
Okay.
Yeah, very important. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening. Good evening.
You're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Sure. I'm listening to the program, but it seems a little worrying to me because Mark the advertising for people in the border to come in, and we just have 13,000 people right now. If all those people come home, are we going to have a water shortage?
I guess the question of having a water shortage, like I mentioned, it's about management. I don't think if the population is to increase, of course, if it doesn't increase drastically, I mean, if 20,000 people, if the population was to jump to 20,000 tomorrow, we'll have a problem. But what I'm getting at and stuff is that we are in the business of managing. So the water that we have, based on what each individual should be using, we have enough water for that. United Nations has a certain quantity, a certain amount that you use for your hygiene, for your cooking, and for all your chores. And we find on average, as Mr. Hanley mentioned, 60% of what we consume here is residential. So that's where most of our usage is. And I'm not telling you it's a consumption, but we want to differentiate between wastage and usage. And I think there's a big difference from where we sit when we look at the numbers. And so, as we're here talking about, drilling new wells to meet some of the demands, we want to talk about conservation. We want to talk about management of your individual, your homes and wherever you're using water, your businesses, and understand that that is part of the equation. Again, the water department, Nevis Water Department, Sinkers Water Services, and wherever you go in the region cannot provide all the water necessary for our existence on the island, our business and all that stuff. We have got to have some skin in the game where we, as I was making the point just before you called caller about cisterns, having cisterns, using the rainfall when it's available, because we just can't. I don't know where the notion came from that the water department is totally and solely responsible for providing water, but that is not the reality of the situation. And so the concern about increased population and stuff is a concern, obviously. But as that happens, as demand increases, and as we're talking about a number of things here tonight, increasing our production while we do conservation, while we try to decrease our wastage, there should be a balance, including the rainfall, rainwater harvesting. Those are all the things we want to put together. We talk about taking the farmers off the potable water and using water that could be trapped in our guts when rains fall. So those are some of the things that we want to pull together, such that whatever call is being made for increased population, that we, when that time comes, we have things in place to manage that increase.
Caller, you're done?
Well, you spoke about the wastage. That might be true. But that still don't say much about the population increase and a long-term solution. We've been digging wells for 40 years. The last time we decided our creek was 100,000 years ago. We keep digging all these holes in this earth. Then if there ever an explosion, it will not be coming from the mountain alone. It will be coming from all the holes that the big is drilling. The first being created in 1912, creating water to the village. The only time I see out in Nevis is when the water call us, no rain at all coming. I can't understand the rain coming in these times and they're telling us no water go. I see donkey walk and drop down, but no rain coming. I could understand that. But in this modern time, New used to go clean from the shore up to the mountains. New River, all those places we used to go to keep picnics and things. These things had the trough and things where they could catch water. All those property were farmed. And they didn't have the technology then. And you're telling me with all this money we're making and we just can't have a long-term solution for water? So, I ain't saying that, no place have enough water. Well, let me tell you something about Singapore. They play basketball with the water. When they walk in the sidewalk, water just splits up. They have a state-of-the-art desalination plant. And they, not only from the sea, the desalination alone, they catch what the rain. We got to do better than this. Somebody sleeping on the job. You could tell me anything about bead? You know the history about bead? The gentleman that's speaking.
You said the issue about bead. I'm not sure what issue you're referring to.
No. I asked you to know the history about bead.
If I know the history of bead?
Yes.
I am pretty familiar with the history of bead, yes.
You know, give me a quick background, because as far as I know, they never drilled nowhere before they come to Nevis. There was a subsidiary of Autumn Water, and the bus off went on the own. A matter of fact, they went to some Autumn Water employees. These people come Nevis and make a home. Over 40 years, they jigging up the place. Well, you need to put up the information in it. That was a scam. They never drilled nothing before. There was a subsidiary there from Autumn Water. You need to put it up and find out what's going on. This thing is going backwards, man. At this day and age, the sources of water to most of the village. We only had dam all over. And you're telling me this age we can't get a reliable source of water. You're telling me about people wasting water. So we have an infrastructure. I keep the things. What are we going to learn? You're going to manage from behind? Are you going to be prepared and have enough water in case such thing happens?
Caller, I can ask you a question?
Sure.
You're suggesting that to get water, they shouldn't dig up so many holes in the ground. That's correct?
This is a time, man. This is a joke. This is a money scheme. Do you know when they had the fire full season? You know what Mark said? Turn on the pressure. That means they had more water. They were just playing to bring a lot. Look, Carl, I them giving me this water for 10 years. And before the 10 years up, we still have water problem. They get a key in 2018, and Mark turn around again and fill in more hole. What kind of game is this? Why we don't have it? We see all them intelligent people, and the camera, they look intelligent and they look really nice. But here's the thing about it: they need to kind of step up to the plate, because 40 years of giving up. And still the next 40 years, and the way you talk about save water, don't waste water. When you waste water, you prefer it, you know. So I don't understand anything but save water. And then they got the water leaking in the roof to these branches, call you and say about the tobacco. He ain't mentioned nothing about a pipe for 36 hours. Why they take so long to get a tobacco? That's a lack of oversight.
So, caller, you don't think they should dig up the holes and stuff like that to get water?
We got water in the center. Every time the rain water come down, when we don't build more catchment.
Okay, so
the source was created in 1912. Do you know what? Charlotte Road in Nevis, they were well occupied at one time. I didn't know that. When I was growing up, I used to walk all these roads. One day when they were about. Nevis was well populated. Over 11,000 people.
So you used to live in Nevis?
Yes, I'm Nevis.
And you still live in Nevis?
No.
So that's what happened to the population?
What happened to the population? Got nothing to do with the water.
Okay, I got you.
Well, about the caller made a good point about Singapore's water. I was fortunate enough to have a bit of training on the water in Singapore, and they actually collect water from 4 different sources. They import water from Malaysia, they have what you call renewable water, where they collect all the wastewater and reuse it, as well as desalination and wells. So they don't just use surface water, they have water from different points. And one of the things that they try to do is reduce what you call wastage. So any water that you use, they take it, purify it, and reuse it again, because they are in a situation where they don't have any, they're surrounded, they don't have any water source as Nevis does. So they basically reduce their wastage.
And I thank Mr. Maynard for that, and I just wanted to address a couple things, Webbo. The time is short, as the caller talked about, and I'm going to stay away from the whole bead stuff. And I just said that I was the one at the time manager of the water department when bead then was engaged. So I don't want to go into too much details. I mean, and these are folks that I've during our conferences just been paying attention to. We talk about company names, and then we have folks who are working within companies. I'll say this, that we have the hydrogeologist who is Skip Hogue, and he has worked with Earthwater, he has worked with Bead, and now he's no longer associated with either one. And we have gotten our money's worth based on his work, and you know, I stand by that. And that's what I say about that.
You were mentioning about the cistern.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the cistern in terms of rainwater harvesting, and I think I was mentioning about trapping the water too. I think too often we think that is an easy process. Bat got run sometimes and tops the bridge there by CSS. You trap the water, and it depends on where you're going to trap the water, because a lot of the water comes off the road. But then you have to trap it, and then you have to move it someplace to treat it. And from treatment, then it has to get back into the system. And so when you look at the amount of water that runs in some of these guts and stuff, it is not easy for potable. Okay, let's look at water for irrigation. Again, water in the bad gut, there aren't any big farms in the Charleston area. So the having trapped water, say, in the bad gut, you have to move it to wherever those farms are. Okay, and the infrastructure that's necessary to do that could cost a couple of dollars. Yeah, when you invest the capital expenditure, it's done, granted. But I think what we're doing here in Nevis is going at different levels. There are countries that have lots of surface water. That's the easiest water to go for, so they go for that. Rivers, they just put a connection in the river and they suck the water out. Then you have groundwater as your next cheaper source. And so we have kind of kept like the more expensive desalination off the table until we now have something that, in terms of the solar PV, that has brought the cost down. So you check any nation, and that's typically the hierarchy of surface water, groundwater, maybe desalination, and in that is a whole bunch of reuse, like Mr. Maynard mentioned for Singapore. So a lot of time we see countries doing things, and in the background it's a lot of work. And so I hear the information, I hear the questions, but the concern about the holes and I mean, where we're drilling and stuff is nowhere close to cause any volcanic activity. That is just something that is just not so. So we don't have any concerns about that. I mentioned about earthquakes and said, well, earthquake was whenever, but the fact that we have had many earthquakes over the last couple weeks and couple years. So, but
let me just take this for you. Good evening, and thank you for holding.
Yeah, Webbo, I have a question to ask. About, you do remember we've had a drilling rig and they fell back and they're never going to be drilling for 40 years? I asked him to explain one to me. You should know about it. Because with all the time we drilling, we could have trained people. That's why we're running into the nursing problem right now. Because we have 100,000 iron users and we're bringing 8 doctors from Cuba. You know how much for going on a small jet? $250,000 for 8 people. But you ask me a question to me, please. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understood the question correctly about the drilling rig.
We just did bought a drilling rig. I think we did 89 or something like that.
89?
The study you were going to send it back. You remember that?
Yeah, let's be honest here. Everybody in the room goes back to 89. The drilling rig we used to use came from Sinkers. We used to borrow the one that Sinkers had.
We had a break that the port chef and the own, and they used to just send it back. And you can't license it in one mouth. But let me tell you something though. If you are going to be in charge of water system, you are going to read the history and the whole water system. You can't be just coming and giving and doing it. You got to young people. They got everything on Google.
We seem to be on different wavelength when it comes to the history of the stuff and the information that you have.
No. Everything on the computer. You don't need to read it for yourself. That's the bottom line.
Well, what's the source of that information then? Do I just do a blanket search for stuff, or you have a particular source?
You ask a question and they will tell you. I hear this guy in the way making everybody's contract for the hospital and the contract right in front of the face on the computer. I don't know what they're trying to hide. But, yeah.
Well, I can't speak for the contract at the hospital, but I
don't have to come in on that. I'm just showing an example.
Well, my point is though that I think some of the information, and I don't want to back and forth between us because I
want you all to go search and do research. It's not about money, it's not about education, it's about information. You have to be some policeman. You can't solve one crime unless of information. Information is the key.
Point taken.
All right, thank you, bye.
Yes, sir.
So Floyd, you are encouraging the use of cisterns,
yes, sir,
as part of your overall plan.
Yes, sir. So I was saying that I'm asking folks who have cisterns. We did a little mini survey, but I'm asking now tonight that they contact the Water Resource Management, and we basically going to go through different layers and levels. That if you have a cistern, we get your location. We want to come out and assess the cistern to make sure it's in good condition. And this is just my proposal. It's not been effected yet, but we are looking now in terms of hopefully through some kind of concession that the government would allow you concessions on a pump and maybe a tank, so at least you'll have your supply connected. Systems back in the day, you had a pipe just attached, you have to go outside. Now we are talking about it being integrated into your household, so even if water goes for whatever reason, or if you prefer to use your cistern water, which is a better quality, you could simply just switch your pump on and have water come into your house.
Because the truth is the reverse is happening.
Yeah.
Persons are building houses and realizing that in their area water is very plentiful.
Yeah.
And so they're opting not to go with cisterns.
Not to. And again, as much as some is not accepting it, the bottom line is that we cannot provide 24/7, 365.
But then you have to reverse that thinking, because the truth is it not that the politicians normally tell you that they're so good in providing you with water, they convince people that they don't have to do a cistern. Is that not true?
Well, I think, well, in terms of the availability, yes, and people miss it. But then the policy is in place, the way about that, cistern has to be built. So I'm not sure who's dropping the ball, to be honest, as we're here tonight. But we're using...
You write a law and then you put it in a desk. What do you think is going to happen?
I'll have to revert to one of the 100,000 lawyers that the guy said Davis has.
No, you don't have to revert to any lawyer. You write something and you put it in a drawer and you lock it. What do you think is going to happen? Nobody will see it, nobody will know about it. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Well, who's got the last word? Who's got the last word?
Oh, I just want to thank Mr. Herbert for having us here, the water team and the integrated water team as well. I just hope that we shed a little light on what we do on a daily, and also just want to encourage customers to pay their bills on time, and also to use our emergency numbers and also our Facebook page as well.
And also, Webbo, as the question was raised about sustainability, that's something that we're working on. And like I said, I think I outlined a couple approaches that we're looking to take. And every day we continuously build and try to be resilient. There's some things that we haven't taken on as yet, but as we go forward, we would just make the adjustment as necessary. As clearly as Mr. Maynard mentioned about Singapore, they didn't get there just overnight. There are situations that all of these countries have to deal with. I think we have heard news of dirty water in the Virgin Islands and the Cayman. I mean, it's just things that are just affecting us, and people having to adjust as we go along. And I think that we are in a good place. I'll say that much, but we have to keep at it, because that could change practically overnight. So I just want to thank you on this event of World Water Week, a week later, that having us here to come on board, and for the folks who called too, and the criticisms, because we're not perfect. We got improvement to make, and I just want to say that we accept that, and as we go back to the drawing board, it's just a work in progress.
That's the last word. This program repeats tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Join Keats Carbo on Thursday evening at 8 o'clock for Government at Work, a place to spend all of your evenings right here in the Eastern Caribbean's powerhouse. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
From the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern.
So many goals for the participants.